Rusi, 4th of April 2024, what is China's silence on the conflict between Pakistan and Afghanistan? China uses Pakistan as a covert army to fight India and maintain control over Afghanistan. Nonetheless, China is concerned about turning India into an enemy due to a possible danger to the Chinese-occupied Ughur terrorists. The banned Tehreek-i-Taliban Pakistan, TTP, also known as the Pakistani Taliban, is a terrorist organization that operates from Afghanistan with more freedom under the Taliban government. On March 18, Pakistan carried out airstrikes inside Afghanistan, targeting the TTP's hideouts. 8 individuals were killed in the strikes, which happened the day after President Asif Ali Zardari threatened to take revenge for the 7 Pakistani soldiers who had been slain in an attack on March 16 by a TTP unit in the country's northwest tribal region that borders Afghanistan. Tensions between Kabul and Islamabad have increased since the Taliban seized control of the country in 2021, primarily as a result of the TTP's cross-border attacks that use Afghan territory. Pakistan's airstrikes on targets in Afghanistan exacerbated these tensions. The Afghan Taliban swiftly responded, firing on Pakistani military outposts near the Afghanistan border, denouncing the strikes as an infringement on Afghanistan's territorial integrity. The Taliban may support the TTP in its long-term retaliation plan to destabilize Pakistan by launching a wave of terrorist strikes throughout the nation of South Asia. Despite being the biggest foreign investor in both Afghanistan and Pakistan and potentially the nation most impacted by an open conflict between the two neighbors, China has remained silent about Pakistan's airstrikes on March 18 that targeted TTP sanctuaries in the eastern provinces of Paktika and Khost in Afghanistan. Beijing has been drafting its policies for Afghanistan with Pakistan's help thus far. China is becoming closer to the Taliban and even taking moves to recognize its rule, while Pakistan is pulling away from the group. Pakistan was instrumental in fostering stronger ties between China and the Taliban. Even before the US and Taliban began peace talks in Doha in 2020, Islamabad surreptitiously mediated all of the China-Taliban peace talks through backdoor channels. The late Maulana Sami-ul-Haq, a staunch supporter of the Afghan Taliban and the head of an Islamist political party in Pakistan, requested that China take a more active role in the peace talks in Afghanistan in October 2018. Often referred to as the father of the Taliban, the Maulana asked Beijing to mediate the Afghan dispute. China and Pakistan pushed the Taliban to take action against Uyghur militants and the TTP, which was operating in Afghanistan and had been responsible for attacks on Chinese and Pakistani targets in Pakistan at the time of the Taliban's takeover of the country after the US withdrew from it in 2021. As of now, though, China and Pakistan do not appear to agree on the Taliban's approach to the TTP. The TTP card is in the hands of the Taliban, who are utilizing it against Pakistan rather than China. Beijing did not pressure the Taliban to carry out the TTP crackdown that Kabul has been pleading with Pakistan to carry out for the last 2 years. The Taliban has given China assurances over the threat posed by Uyghur extremists, which has been China's primary concern. Though the TTP has escalated its attacks on Pakistan's security forces, it is surprising that the group has not targeted Chinese targets in Pakistan during the last 2 years. Does the Taliban regime in Kabul serve as the focal point of the selective terrorist game? Have the Taliban and China formed a secret understanding over the TTP? Has the TTP received a word from the Taliban to refrain from attacking Chinese sites in Pakistan? China's quiet over the TTP's war on Pakistan is interpreted as an endorsement of the Taliban's stance on the TTP, as the Taliban has described the TTP as an internal matter of Pakistan. China has been strengthening its relations with the Taliban regime even though Pakistan and the Taliban have been exchanging angry words and physical threats across the border regarding the TTP issue over the past 2 years. Furthermore, China has been silent when it comes to the Taliban's accommodation of TTP members in Afghanistan. There's more to this story than meets the eye. China may be using a carrot-and-stick strategy with the Taliban, as seen by its quiet after Pakistan strikes inside Afghanistan. Due to security concerns, China, which has a tiny border with Afghanistan, cannot afford to aggravate the Taliban in its neighborhood. China has shown little concern for the Taliban government's ban on girls attending school, violations of women's rights, or political reforms. It is more worried about the threat that Uyghur terrorists pose to its internal security, as they may draw encouragement and support from the hostile Taliban regime that exists nearby. As part of its strategy to engage the Taliban, Beijing has raised its stakes in Afghanistan. China has the resources and influence to take a more significant part in the abandoned and isolated nation. Following the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, it made deal after deal with the de facto Taliban leadership to exploit the country's abundant mineral and energy resources. China made an offer to invest $10 billion to mine the enormous lithium deposits in Afghanistan just 3 months after concluding a $540 million agreement with the Taliban regime last year for the extraction of oil from the Amudarya Basin in northern Afghanistan. In a formal ceremony on January 30, China acknowledged former Taliban spokesperson Bilal Karimi as an official envoy to Beijing. In contrast to the West's strategy of isolating the Taliban due to its restrictions on women's rights and freedoms, China has recognized the Taliban envoy, which is consistent with its goal of engaging the group. Since the U.S. withdrew in 2021, Beijing has become more cautious in how it has used its Afghan card. But China has secured the group a significant diplomatic victory by reducing the group's international isolation by acknowledging the Taliban ambassador. The Afghan endgame has become a zero-sum situation for Islamabad. China is unable to abandon an irate Pakistan to the U.S., which has backed Islamabad's stance against the TTP by pleading with the Taliban to keep Afghanistan from turning into a haven for the terrorist organization. Some Pakistani sectors have called for the U.S. and other countries to bomb terrorist hideouts in Afghanistan. After a deadly attack on Pakistan security forces in December 2023 that claimed the lives of 23 Pakistani troops, a former minister in the provincial administration of Pakistan offered the U.S. drone bases the opportunity to target militant sanctuaries in Afghanistan. China will not accept a situation like this one that is developing. The TTP, which has a more similar ideology to the Taliban, is being harbored by the Taliban, which worries China much. The most significant security threat to China's intention to expand the $62 billion China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, the centerpiece project of its Belt and Road Initiative, to Afghanistan is the existence of TTP hideouts in the country's border regions with Pakistan. For this reason, Beijing has made security and better relations with neighbors the primary requirements before fully recognizing the Taliban government. It seems improbable that Pakistan launched airstrikes against TTP sanctuaries without consulting China first. Beijing's demands for moderation are something neither nation can afford to ignore, so Beijing can use its influence over both to put pressure on them to settle their differences amicably. Suppose China fails to defuse tensions along its border with Pakistan. In that case, it might jeopardize its billion-dollar plans to extend the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, into Afghanistan and beyond. China would be the actual loser in an Afghanistan-Pakistan confrontation. Afghanistan is a prime location to act as a trading hub between Europe, Central Asia, and the Middle East. China views Afghanistan as a critical location to expand its global influence.